I'm Jesse Hoekstra. I'm a volunteer with Our Neighbors, and I'm here to give you some tips on how to properly prune and care for young trees. And I'm going to start by just showing you some of the tools that are typically used for this type of maintenance. So these are a couple of saws, just two different sizes of folding saws. There are fixed saws, there are pole saws, and all of them come in their own very specific use. This saw is just a little bit longer. It gives me a little bit more reach. I can reach up higher in the tree. It's got a longer draw. I can cut bigger branches faster. This is similar, just a smaller version of that. It's handier, can fit in my pocket and carry it around pretty easily. So those are taking larger branches off the tree, but when it comes to smaller branches, I like to use a pruner like this. This is a Felco. I'm not a salesperson for Felco, but this is top of the line brand. Every part of it is replaceable. It's a bypass pruner, so the blade will shear the branch versus an anvil pruner will smash the branch, causing damage to the wood on the branch. And every time we make a cut on a tree, we want to make sure that we're making a clean cut in the appropriate place so that the callus tissue forms quickly and prevents the or reduces the likelihood that insects or pathogens can penetrate that wound. The first things you want to consider removing are dead, dying, and diseased branches. Take those off. If they're broken, you can tell if it's dead by taking a little scratch to the little bit of the branch. If you see green, that's a sign that tree's still alive. If it's leafed out, it's obviously a little easier to tell. Any suckers coming from the base of the tree, those can also be removed. That type of growth takes energy away from the crown of the tree, which is what we want to grow and flourish. So always remove suckers there. Suckers in the crown of the tree can be identified by just vertical growth versus gradual arching outward growth. So they're pretty easy. They even in some species can be a different color of bark. So when I talk about codominant branches, you may have two branches that are both shooting straight up to try to be that leader, that dominant central leader in the tree. And we don't like that because what can happen is if they both occupy a major portion of that crown and one of them were to split out, which is pretty common because they're not strongly attached to the trunk, they're actually creating a competitive connection to that trunk. And so if they were to split out, now you've lost a big portion of your tree and you probably have it tear down, doesn't have a clean cut. So we can look at a codominant situation. We can cut back to a lateral. It may be subdued, and then maybe next year we consider maybe we take that codominant completely out, maybe a few years down the road. So when you're considering what branches you're going to prune on a tree, you have to think about what are the permanent branches, or what's the lowest permanent branch, and which branches are temporary, in that they may be there for the next 2 to 5 years, or maybe even you can look far enough ahead where you see a branch that maybe 10 years from now that branch won't be there, but for now we need that to provide nutrients from the sun and leaves and moisture transferring out to those branches from the roots. So radial symmetry means, and I kind of equate this to a spiral staircase. I don't necessarily want the branches spiraling around upwards, but I want some branches going this way, and then maybe at the next level up, I want the branch going this way, so that those branches aren't lying out in the same plane right on top of each other. So when I see branches stacked right above each other, those are situations where I might want to pick one. I got to pick, is the lower one in a better position? Is the upper one in a better position? And then pick, okay, I'm going to take this one out. And maybe I look to the next level above that and say, is there a similar situation, two branches stacked, or are they across from each other? when you have branches that are directly across from each other, you also have a decision to make. When branches attach to the trunk, you have wood from the branches wrapping around the trunk wood, and if you have branches across from each other, they're both competing for space on that trunk. So if we can decide which one of those might be appropriate or best to remove, that's another thing to consider when pruning a tree. If you have a tree, a larger tree that's up against a structure, it's always a good idea to keep any of those branches off of the structure. You don't want a tree rubbing on your house isn't good for your siding or your roof, and it's also not good for the branch. It's going to damage itself in that position. So those are things to consider when the tree is even before it's reached that stage of making contact with your house, to say, oh yeah, that branch is pointing out towards my house. I'm going to think about taking that branch off before it even gets there. So when I make a cut with a pruner, I can make a cut. You can make a cut this way, or you can make a cut this way. If I make my cut this way with this part of the pruner down, it doesn't allow me to get as close to the trunk as I would like. If I make a cut on a branch with my pruner in this direction, that blade, only the thickness of the blade is keeping me away from the trunk. So that way I can make my cut as close to the trunk as possible without making a flush cut. And that's just another tip with using a pruner. And when I make a cut with a saw, I want to do the 3-step method. So the 3-step cut method starts with an undercut. I take my saw and I go on the underside of the branch and about a quarter to a third of the way through the branch, and then I come to my top cut to the outside of that, and this is a few inches away from the trunk. This is going to take the weight off of the branch, and when those two cuts bypass, the branch will fall, or you can snap the branch off in a controlled fashion and set it down. And then I'll make my third cut at the branch bark ridge. I'll follow that branch bark ridge down around. It's not completely parallel with the trunk, but it could be at like a 60 to 45 degree angle depending on the species. There's an art and a science to tree pruning, and both parts of it are of interest to me. And I think as you find you have new trees in your yard, that you'll go out to them more frequently. Maybe it's just a hand pruner. It's really easy to go out with your hand pruner and make a couple snips, and you'll see these little donuts form of callus tissue. You'll be encouraged to do some more and kind of create a shape that really is pleasing to you, but also enhances that structure of that tree.